Hi, this is Dr. Sonia Nayyar. Welcome to my dementia series. Today we're going to be talking about terminology in dementia. And the first thing I really wanted to do was to talk about dementia and really what's the difference between all the different terminologies that you hear with it. So people tend to use dementia, Alzheimer's, dementia, kind of interchangeable, but really how it is dementia is the umbrella term. So you kind of have dementia on the top and then you have different categories of dementia, which Alzheimer's is the most common kind. So let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's dementia is usually broken up into two separate categories. You have the early onset dementia, which is when people start to develop symptoms before the age of 65. Then we have our late onset Alzheimer's, where people start to develop symptoms usually after the age of 65. And we'll talk mostly about Alzheimer's throughout this series because I think most people have been diagnosed or have a cared one or know of someone who's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's going to be the primary focus. But I'm going to touch upon a few other dementias and briefly talk about them throughout the rest of the series as well. Another common dementia is vascular dementia. This really comes from the thought process that when people have high vascular risk factors, which is the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, and here in the US, obesity is considered a vascular risk factor, it increases their risk of having multiple strokes. And over time, the multiple strokes that people have cause cognitive issues. So it's kind of a newer entity, but people have noticed that vascular dementia really plays a part in Alzheimer's. So there's not a very strict black and white line, and they sometimes is a blurred line between the two. The next one is dementia with Lewy body. Now, a lot of people weren't aware of this until just a few years ago when actor Robin Williams died from dementia with Lewy body. And the diagnosis with this is really based a lot on clinical symptoms, meaning what does the neurologist pick on the history as well as the physical examination, because they can have a lot of visual hallucinations, a lot of fluctuations in symptoms, and can even have Parkinson-like symptoms. Now, the tricky part is this is not to be confused with Parkinson's with dementia, which is patients who have had Parkinson's for a long period of time and develop dementia. That's a different entity. Now, next becomes the frontotemporal dementia. These are dementias where people have personality changes, behavior changes, along with the cognitive changes. And the one thing I really want to emphasize is that it is very difficult to distinguish between all of these if you have a roughly normal examination and a very simple complaint of memory issues. So for neurologists and primary care doctors, it can be very difficult to distinguish between all of them. And sometimes, unfortunately, they can be first thought to be one dementia, and later on with time we think it's another type of dementia. The good news is that most of it is treated the same way. So even if the diagnosis is a little bit confusing, most of the treatment is the same. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, just very briefly, is this concept of what's called MCI, which stands for mild cognitive impairment. Now, these are patients that are not entirely normal, but they're not so cognitively impaired that they can't do their daily activities. They have mild changes, but they're still able to work. They're still able to do what they need to do on a daily basis. They fall under the category of mild cognitive impairment. And this is really important because these are the people that you can start lifestyle changes to decrease their risk of going into dementia. So you will hear me use the terminology MCI, mild cognitive impairment, throughout the series. And just know that these are the people who are kind of in that pre-dementia screen that we try to act on to prevent them getting dementia. So just a little overview about the different types of dementias. Like I said, we'll be primarily focusing on Alzheimer's dementia, and every now and then I may bring up one of the other ones, but because of the sheer numbers of patients that have Alzheimer's, we'll be focusing on that. Next series, we will talk about numbers, statistics, and epidemiology to get a better understanding of who in America is being affected with dementia and how many people are affected. Thank you.